when somebody goes and sees a pony or horse in the field and they decide that they're going to feed them something, I kind of almost want to say to them, just take a second.
What are the dangers and the risks of going and feeding a horse that you don't know?
Ponies are very greedy. So if they see something that they think looks yummy, they'll give it a go, even if it's going to damage them. If someone will pass by a field, enjoy the kind of company of a pony for a minute and give them something they've got in their pocket. Half an hour later, the owner's been up with the vet treating this horse.
Knowing that these animals would have continued their lives as much loved pets and family members.
Get permission first.
Have you ever fed a horse without the owner's permission and without knowing the harm that it can cause? Or has your horse been fed by walkers, children, or holiday makers with catastrophic consequences? Recently, I nearly lost my miniature horse because of tourists secretly feeding him sacks of apples. It was absolutely terrifying and I felt completely powerless. Thankfully, he pulled through, but it did get us thinking about all of the horses and the equestrians suffering because of this very preventable issue. And so we reached out to Natalie Munir, who runs the campaign Stop Feeding Our Horses. Natalie is impassioned to educate people against feeding strangers' horses. She gained a social media following after the spike of equine tragedies during lockdown. And alongside the team, she raises awareness about the dangers and the avoidable deaths of horses with powerful signs, posters, and online content. Natalie's efforts have been celebrated with a welfare award from the BHS, presented by none other than Martin Clunes, for her incredible and impactful voluntary work. So, how can we stop people feeding our horses? Let's find out. Natalie, welcome to Curious Equestrian.
Thank you for having me.
Now, take us back to the start of the campaign. What inspired you to launch Stop Feeding Our Horses?
So this was all instigated by lockdown. So what we found was, and I'm, at that point, I was just kind of spending time walking around the village with my children, enjoying the sunshine as other people were. And I noticed that kind of signs were popping up, and owners were getting quite protective over passers-by feeding their horses and things. And I also noticed online that loads more stories were popping up about horses being fed by walkers, and it was having quite a detrimental effect. One of the real key stories that I saw was where a bag of potatoes was tipped into a field and a horse choked to death on the potato. That was lightning. You might remember that one. And that was just a really traumatic, terrible story. But there were so many others, and I just thought I was on maternity leave at the time, and I thought, what can I do to help this? With this, I've got a little bit of time on my hands around parenting. What can I do? And I didn't feel like I could physically, be around doing things, but what I could do is have maybe some influence online. So, myself and a couple of other people started setting up a social media page and groups. One of them was private, and it was to be a kind of safe place for owners to come forward and share their stories, and for us to kind of get together and plan some tactics on how we could kind of try and tackle the problem. And then another one was a public group, and it was just to try and get the message out there and share more widely with some of the things that were happening, and we could kind of try and get a message out there to explain to people the dangers. Because I think the key thing is majority of people don't have any idea that it's dangerous, and it's a completely harmless thing, and even kind of picking some lush grass on one side of the fence and feeding it over the fence could actually be dangerous, because you don't know if that's been sprayed by the farmer or the grass in there is, shorter, and you might have laminitic ponies and things. But more often than not, people would be walking out with carrots and apples, or plan a trip to go out there to feed the ponies locally and, bring their kitchen scraps and things from home and save them for the ponies in the village kind of thing. And that was just happening more and more. So that was kind of how it started up, really. And then it just grew. More stories that we came across. It just seemed like it was well, in fact, to begin with, we thought it was a national problem, but it was actually a global problem. And stories were shared from all over the place. And we had no idea how big it was at first. But yeah, it just expanded. Um, we had a lot of support from the BHS as well. They were very aware, obviously, of um, what a huge problem it was, and they were taking kind of measures themselves. A guy, Dr. David Marlin, started carrying out some studies and kind of sending out questionnaires and stuff. And he got some really interesting information back. I think he worked with the BHS and the University of Bristol on that. So yes, it just, you know, we were playing a small part in it, but um, just trying to kind of, educate and get the message out, and also help owners in trying to tackle the problem themselves.
Where were you in that time of your life? Obviously, in lockdown, where were you in the country? And at that point, did you have your own horses? Did you have a real fiery passion for horses? Is that where your willingness and your need to get involved came from?
Yeah, so I've been, horsey girl, been riding since I was 4 years old. It's just, yeah, in my blood. It's always been, um, yeah, yeah, my kind of main hobby and, well, career early on, until maybe, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, I had a bit of a switch of career, got a proper office job, and something to, a few more pennies. And also because we'd had kids, it just didn't feel like I could really dedicate the same level of time. So, yeah, so at that time, let me think, I had a toddler, 2-year-old, and I just had my second. He was born into lockdown. So at the time, we were doing a lot of sling walks and dog walks in the woods, and around the local area, where the ponies are. So we would go out every day and visit the ponies, but we would always walk by. And also because it was kind of COVID times, we wouldn't even touch them, as much as I want to stroke a velvety nose, we would just stand back and just admire them, because we're aware that even, touching them and then touching the next ponies, or somebody else coming along with COVID and stretching their nose and us doing it, could obviously spread the virus. So we're really kind of careful about that. So just doing our kind of daily exercise and trying to get out there. So yeah, that's where we were really at that time. Um, so yeah, didn't have any horses myself, but was just really keen to try and kind of give something back and support the kind of local community as well as the wider community with
And for
anything I could
those
do.
who've stumbled across this and have no idea why it would be a problem to feed a horse in a field, what are the dangers and the risks of going and feeding a horse that you don't know?
Yeah, so it's twofold. I mean, before I kind of talk about what actually happens, I think the key thing for me is when somebody goes and sees a pony or horse in the field and they decide that they're going to feed them something, I kind of almost want to say to them, just take a second and think about it, because this isn't your animal. This isn't a pet. I mean, this isn't your pet. This animal is belonged by someone else. And there's no way that you would walk past someone's garden, see a dog in their garden and feed them something. So there's a kind of assumption that just because it's in a field, it's public property. It's not. These horses are owned by humans, and they love them
Mm.
dearly, and they spend a lot of money on their care and upkeep. And so there's that. There's the kind of, why would you do it? And obviously, if you know the owner, you can ask them, and they may love for you to give them a carrot, once a week or something. They might be very happy with that. But the key thing is kind of having that permission. So the risk of feeding, to start with, are um, so horses are very complex animals. They have a really complex digestive system. Something that they get more often than not is colic. So they have quite a long digestive tract, like meters and meters long, and there's particular areas in that kind of get quite narrow, and they also almost like have kind of 180-degree turn. So if they overeat something, they can sometimes really struggle to digest it, and that can cause lots of problems like impaction, where they get a kind of blockage. And if they can't work it out themselves, then it might result in an operation. If you're giving them something they're not used to, that isn't in their normal diet, that can kind of exacerbate stuff. So horses typically, especially if they're out grazing, they'll just be constantly eating grass all day. If they then suddenly stop eating, that can cause problems. If they're given something unusual, that's going to cause problems. If someone chucked over a pile of vegetable peelings or something, it's going to have an issue. Also, some people think that grass clippings are safe for horses because, it's grass. But actually, what happens with grass cuttings in particular is they start to ferment. So if you dump a pile of grass cuttings, they'll start to ferment. And if horses eat that fermentation carries on in their gut.
Oh,
It releases gases and stuff, which has such a dangerous, they basically, the gastric funds in their stomach, and it can be fatal, or it can have, at best, require veterinary assistance. So there's also something called choke, which is where horses can't be sick. Their body isn't designed to do that. So if something goes down, it has to keep going, can't come back up. So if they're given something that's too chunky for them to kind of chew, they might be elderly, they might have really rubbish teeth. So if they struggle to chew something properly, it's going to get stuck. Um, and so there's something called laminitis as well. So it is basically a really common problem, particularly in chubby ponies. And it's all kind of to do with the sugars. So I think a lot of people will be amazed in how much sugar's in grass.
yeah.
Grass
I
just
mean,
seems like nothing, but
disbelief, isn't
we
it?
can't eat
Absolute
it.
disbelief that you see a horse and everyone assumes horses are built and meant and have evolved to eat grass. But it's one of the biggest problems, isn't it, as a horse owner now, managing the land and
Yeah,
managing the grass levels. I know that, me and my mum struggle to keep that juggle going and to make sure there's enough, but not too much. And we've got horses of different sizes and
yeah,
miniatures. So it's such a conundrum, isn't it, what to do each year?
absolutely. And as you say, people just don't understand that. They've got no idea. And sometimes owners will be seen as being really cruel. And we have our own words for things. We call, rugs that they wear at night pajamas, or, whatever. And we might say we're putting them in a starvation paddock. Obviously, we're not starving them, but
Yes.
we know
Yeah.
how susceptible they are to that, yes, high quality grass. So it's really important that we make sure we manage that. So it might look to somebody passing by, oh my goodness, that pony's got nothing to eat. But we know we might have given them, a wedge of hay 3 times a day, and that is their limit. That's all they can have
Right.
today, because they're on a strict diet. They're really laminitic. They have a lot that, we're doing the right things for them. But to somebody that doesn't understand that, it looks cruel. So I completely get that,
That
and which is why we say it's a kind thing. It's not malicious. Somebody is trying to do something nice, but they don't understand actually the management it takes to make sure that they don't overeat.
100%. And it's such a huge issue. And actually, Natalie, you greet me today sort of already riled up by an experience that I've been going through with my rescue herd of horses. Um, we've had a diabolical time. And I've known about your campaign for many years and have supported your efforts in spreading the word on social media and opening up the discussion about deterring people from feeding horses. And I've just been unfortunate enough that feeders, holiday makers, walkers, tourists have been secretly feeding my rescue miniature ponies. And it all began, obviously they are susceptible to laminitis, as all miniature ponies are at 34 inches. They are tiny. So they have to have soaked hay. They have to have very restricted turnout. And like you mentioned, the word starvation paddock, exactly that. They have a mud paddock with open stables. So lots of places to explore, but they have their soaked hay and just the right amount for their weights and their heights. But to the external eye, people probably think, oh, there's nothing in there. But there is, and there's all sorts of low sugar treats and low sugar forage hanging all around the stable and in treat balls. So it's all very, very, very carefully managed by me and my mum. And we had the absolute horror that our tiniest little American miniature rescue, Diesel, went down with laminitis. Now, normally in the stable, deep bed, all the usual low sugar maintenance and management precautions are put into play. We did our usual regime that if there's even a little bit of soreness or footiness, we jump into action and we catch it early, and it never progresses further than that. This time round, we could not understand why he kept going further and further downhill. We felt hopeless. We felt devastated. We thought, what are we doing wrong? We were staying up late at night, racking our brains. Could it be something we've missed? The vet was coming out saying this is, there's obviously something underlying. Maybe it's Cushing's, maybe it's EMS, maybe it's something worse. We're going to have to do blood tests, investigations. And he kept getting worse and worse and worse. And what it transpired, what we found out was we changed our daily routine. So obviously the 3 times a day we go up, we swapped all our timings around. And lo and behold, through the gates, trespassers came, holiday makers that had been staying very close to the land that we rent. Through the gates, they came with a massive sack of apples. And throughout their holiday stay, they had been bringing big sacks of apples from the farmer's market and feeding it to Diesel, who is tiny. I mean, I cannot describe how big these sacks were. And that had been what almost killed him. And we managed to sort of stop them in their tracks and say, oh, excuse me, what are you doing? Do you realise he's been seriously ill, that you've nearly killed him by feeding him these apples? And all we were greeted with was, oh, but he's so cute. Oh, but he's so cute at the fence. And we were just like, our jaw dropped. I didn't know what to say after that. I didn't, I'd explained that he'd been in like a nursery situation in a like intensive care stable, that the vet had been out every day, that we were despairing he was close to death. And it just didn't sink in with this person. I just said, no. We said, please never feed this horse. Do not feed horses you don't know. And then we proceeded, although we had already had some signs up, we proceeded to then buy out our local supplier of CCTV in action, no trespassers, no unauthorised people behind this gate. And we have obsessively littered every fence with signs, to the point that, you'd have to be a peculiar person to now avoid these signs. We bought all of the, please do not feed these horses, your kindness may kill them. We've put them on every post rail, so that if any of the horses come up at a particular point in the fence, it's covered at that post, to be as clear can be. But Natalie, I'm sure you feel the same. Even though we've put these precautions up, at the end of the day, if someone wants to trespass and is going to take it upon themselves to feed a horse, short of camping there, what else can we do? And you feel so out of control and you feel so powerless, don't you? And I'm sure this is one of many hundreds
Well,
of
and this is the
stories you've
conundrum.
heard.
Yeah. And it's impossible, it's completely impossible. And you feel like you're going way overboard. I mean, it feels like you're kind of almost putting them in this, I don't know, um, prison camp, like you're wrapping them up because you want to,
Yeah,
to cover everything that you can
yeah,
possibly do to try and kind of deter people from feeding. And sometimes even all of that is not enough, because it's like a sign saying, don't walk on the grass. Some people will just ignore it. They just think they know better and they will do it regardless. And even, like you say, having that conversation with the people, and they still just don't get it. They don't hear what you're saying. They just think it's nice. And, you use the term killing with kindness. Completely, accurate. We are just seeing that they are trying to do this, not what they see as a nice thing, and they cannot understand how it can possibly be cruel. And I guess, I mean, the equine industry doesn't have a great reputation, particularly right now. You will often see, I'm sure, people worrying about equine welfare. And the racing industry doesn't have a great reputation. More recently, even the dressage industry has kind of gone under the microscope a lot. And people obviously are concerned, but there's also a huge level of ignorance and lack of understanding. And I mean, any sport horse I know, their owners, their grooms, everybody involved, they love that horse to pieces. And they go above and beyond to give them that level of care. And they manage their lifestyle so carefully. If God forbid the worst happened, they would be besides themselves. They adore them. That's why they do it. Um, Horses aren't treated like bikes. They are respected and very, very well looked after. But I think there's just such a level of ignorance that people don't really understand what goes in, that people just don't have that awareness. So I think the big part of the kind of campaign that we were trying to do was just educate and go about it in the right way. We didn't want to kind of get angry with people for doing it. We wanted them just to understand the dangers and the risks and then what's happening. You talked about all the things that you put in place with your ponies to try and protect them. And that was a kind of a lot of the advice that we gave out as well. We talked about kind of, so lot of fields might have, hedgerows or post and rail around the outside. And we encouraged kind of electric fencing as well, just to kind of set the horses back a bit further so they wouldn't necessarily put their
Yeah.
heads over the fence to reach. And, talk about CCTV, that's not a, small investment, but sometimes it's
No.
necessary, especially if your horses live, far away from where you are and you can't kind of keep a close eye and you're visiting them, 1, 2 times a day, maybe. It's really challenging. I mean, the signage is great. And one of the things that we found was really effective actually was a kind of personal sign. So we produced a few signs for sale. And we worked with a couple of companies to do that. We had some car stickers and we had, yes, field signs and stuff as well. But one thing we were asked a few times was, can you make me a bespoke sign for my horse or my pony? So we did do that.
Oh.
Um, you mentioned EMS a little while ago. So one owner, for example, um, she explained how her horse had EMS, which is equine metabolic syndrome, which is really similar to diabetes. So
Mm.
basically, her horse is really susceptible to a lot of kind of sugars in the diet, and even that comes from grass. There's an amazing amount of sugar in grass, especially lush grass. So this time of year, now it's in springtime, it's quite challenging for owners to manage that. And you talked about strip paddocks and things and fencing sections off, so only allowing them to have a small amount at a time because they could otherwise just go in and gorge themselves. And you've also got me thinking about muzzles as well. Common muzzles for ponies, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, the
Grazing
grazing
muzzles,
muzzles. Yeah.
which look horrific. And if you were someone that didn't know about ponies, you saw that on a pony, you'd think that poor pony can't eat grass, poor thing. And I've had stories of people taking them off because they think they know better and they want to take them off to help the pony, but obviously that isn't helpful at all. So some of the
Oh
kind of signs we
God.
made, some for ponies with EMS, ponies with the laminitic, and actually that worked quite well because it felt like those that
Mm.
coming past got to know the ponies. Oh, this is Bella. She's got the kind of this going on. I can't eat this, or I'm Bob and I've got no teeth. I can't eat this. Please don't feed me. It kind of really
Yeah.
helped for people passing by because they felt like they could actually get to know the ponies and what the kind of risks of what they might do could affect them. So that was quite
Yeah.
effective. As you say, there's lots of kind of things that we suggested owners could do, but at the end of the day, can't physically stop people from doing it. So even with the fencing, setting them back and stuff, they could stand there and chuck a carrot if they wanted to.
Mm.
They could do all of that. So you physically can't stop anybody, but you can do what you can. So yeah, that was part of the campaign. We're just
And
trying
they
to
do.
help people to
And
think
they
about
do.
other.
Because previously at our previous land, we set them back from, we had signs on the gate. This was at the previous marshland that we rented before it flooded. We had signs on the gates. We set them back with electric fencing, and people would still lob apple cores as far as they could to reach the miniatures. And you think, what does it take? And you make that key point of education. Natalie, how far do you think it needs to go? We've got signs, you've got personalised signs, car stickers, social media campaigns to spread awareness and to make viral posts and shareable posts to spread the word. What will it take? What next do you think will it take to stop people from doing this and to educate further?
So I'm really passionate, and I can hear that you're really passionate. And now that it's not happened to you, which I'm
I'm
so sorry about,
I'm
I know
speaking to such
how much work
kindred
you're
spirit
doing.
here, Natalie, like such a kindred spirit. And to have that shared philosophy and that shared experience, I think it makes you feel empowered together, really, to have these kind of conversations that we feel we can have this discussion, we can put it out, into the podcast sphere, onto the internet, and hope that it will reach other people that will share this and spread the word. They'll pop it on social media. They might share it with friends. They might even share it to friends that are dog walkers, on a bridle path with fields of horses. And we have that hope that actually the message might reach far and wide. As you say, it's not just a local issue. It's not just a national issue. It's a worldwide issue. How far can we share this podcast episode and hope to educate people? And that's my my real ambition for this episode together that we're creating today. And I'm hoping, Natalie, that you've got big dreams. What do you think next in terms of education? What do you think, what else can be done?
Yeah, it's a really challenging one because I think what's really important, what really helps is the engagement and the commitment from other people. So in the
Mhm.
past, a lot of people that joined the campaign were going out there and making themselves known and educating. So I had some women, for example, they went to their local primary schools and they spoke to the children, and it was so interesting to see the reaction because the kind of what happened was they were explaining to these children the risk. And it was interesting, like they asked the question, would you ever feed a dog chocolate? And they know the answer's no. But would you ever
Mhm.
go and, walk past a pony and feed them carrots? Yes, yes, we would.
Mhm.
So it's kind of re-educating to say, actually, can't really do that. You haven't spoken to the owner. It's not your, you don't own that pony. You need to get permission before you do that. So it's a really interesting education piece. And then what we saw was that the kids would go away and they'd tell their parents, you can't feed that random pony that you don't know. You can't do that. Um,
Yes.
so that was really, really valuable. And the more that happens, the better. I actually found locally that there's some donkeys in the village, at the other end of the village, that some of the school children will walk past and they might, decide to offer some carrots. And so I had a conversation with one of the teachers to say, you can't do that. They're not, that you don't own them. Funnily enough, they happen to be moved. So next time they kind of came by, they were disappointed to see that the donkeys weren't there. They were set back
Yeah.
in a paddock that they couldn't reach. And I can't help but wonder, was that a reflection on the kind of action that was happening?
Yes.
And the owners are trying to protect them and move them back. I mean, I've had owners kind of say to me that they're losing their land effectively because they're having to set their ponies further and further back, and they're, not able to utilize the kind of grazing that they would like to because they're just trying to protect them, and have them further from, public footpaths or roads and things for their own sake. I've also known people that have physically moved their ponies or horses, and they've been at, lovely yards, which are a really handy spot for them, and they physically moved them somewhere else just to put them in a safe place because there's just too much footfall, and they can't be sure that they can keep them away from passers-by, which is not ideal. It's really challenging, but these are the lengths that, that we have to do as pony owners, horse owners, to make sure that our animals are safe. Um,
And
and it,
land
and
is
you know, it's
increasingly hard to find, isn't it, Natalie, as well? And actually, I don't know about you, but, for me, when you're looking at potential premises that you can rent or land that you might be able to rent for your animals, increasingly you're having to turn down opportunities because it's on a really busy public footpath. And you just know, like you say, you're going to lose half of that field for moving them back. You then can't rotate them and move them around the field. They're stuck in a permanent sort of box, which you don't want for your horses. And you're not able to utilize the space. And then you have to look for other options. And there's less and less land
yeah,
for equestrians now to use because of farming and because of housing and all the rest of it. So then we're feeling trapped as well, and we're feeling like there are less opportunities for horse ownership because of the lack of land too.
for sure. And also the kind of levels of enrichment that we might want to give them. So we might want to utilize the hedgerow and things that are there that are available, and we're kind of losing that as well. So
Mm.
yeah, there's so many impacts I think
So
that
many
people aren't really
issues.
considering. And also, it's just a kind of complete innocent act. So
Mm.
someone might pass by a field, enjoy the kind of company of a pony for a minute and give them something they've got in their pocket, and then carry on walking. And they don't know that, half an hour later, the owner's been up with the vet treating this horse. Um, and I remember someone talking to me about an incident where something like that had happened, and then a week later, the same person came past the field and said, "Oh, where's he gone? Where's he not in the field anymore?" And they explained what had happened and the impact feeding had had, and that horse wasn't around anymore because of it. And that really obviously kind of hit home to that person. But we shouldn't need to come to that, those levels of extreme for people to understand, and kind of and react to what's being said and listen to what's being said. I just wish people would hear what we're saying is serious, and take it like that. Um, I think also we haven't had um, any favours done for us. I know a little while ago there was an incident that was reported on what's the program called? But it was where oh my goodness, like a good morning program, and somebody was basically had this happen, and the presenters made fun about it. You know, what's so bad about giving them some grass? They didn't take it seriously. We did issue a complaint and ask for kind of retraction, but it didn't gain legs. Um, but you know, if we've got that level of interaction, that kind of media attention, and then not on our side, it just doesn't help us out. There have been numerous programs. I mean, the BBC did a brilliant program, interviewed us a few years ago, and you know, there's been loads of kind of newspaper articles and stuff written, and loads of horse and hound articles written, and that's all really helpful. But it's also kind of to a specific audience. So it's the mainstream media that we really need to listen and to kind of side with us, because they're the ones that are going to get the public kind of get on their side and explain to them the dangers. It's all well and good being in our industry, but it's that reach that we need to go a bit further, because we all know the dangers within the equine industry, but it's those outside of that that need to have that understanding.
Exactly.
I was also just thinking about
Exactly. Of
an
those who
incident
are
that happened a
listening,
while ago. So, you know, I
yeah,
talked
go on,
about
Natalie, sorry.
um, colic and choke and laminitis and stuff and grass cutting, but I was also just thinking about injury in general. So, you know, we're careful when we manage our group of horses together and how they interact with each other. And we know sometimes, like if you were giving them their feed, you'd spread out their buckets to make sure that they can't scrap. Because, you know, they might fight over food occasionally. But there has been some incidences where people would feed over the fence and horses would get quite territorial and then fight. And there was the most horrific injury of one horse called Flash. And it was basically because somebody fed him something, and it still wasn't very happy about it. And, you know, and they had a fight. And, you know, he's never been the same since. He had a huge amount of veterinary attention to kind of try and help him out. Um, but, you know, I think he's now ridden and back in work, but it took a long, long time to get there, and obviously huge expense. But that's just the most kind of simple thing that could happen just from field mates, you know, fighting with each other because of feeding.
There's so many different branches to this, aren't there? Like you say, injury, death, illness. And of course, at the end of every one of those different scenarios is a huge vet bill as well, leaving the owners not only devastated about what's happened, whether it is death or whether it is severe illness or whether it is injury, but there's also thousands of pounds to pay in vet bills and only the owner to pick up that cost. And I know that from personal experience. We had thousands of pounds of vet bills to pay to cover the investigations with the vets and the the medications, the treatments, and then all the bedding costs from him being in and all the rest of it. The costs just keep tallying up, and at the end of the day, we have to pay that, even though it was not down to our management. It was down to someone feeding the horses, and we were just lucky enough to be able to say that we caught those people and we were able to stop it happening and well, hopefully, touch wood, and able to get Diesel back from the brink. But he also suffered for the first time in his entire life with a rotation of his pedal bone in his hoof. And at the age of 14, throughout his life, he'd only ever had that sort of touch of inflammation of laminitis right at the early stages. We'd always caught it on time. We'd always nipped it in the bud before it became anything serious. And for the first time, due to people feeding Diesel, he now has a slight rotation. And apparently, if he goes down with laminitis again, he might have to have hoof boots. And the costs continue and the worry continues as to what that might mean for him and his little hooves. And I just can't believe, it's still, as you can probably tell, it's still so fresh, and it makes me feel so angry and upset that this has happened due to people trespassing and take it upon themselves to feed. And I think we have to talk about those intentions, Natalie, because through talking about this on Curious Equestrian and on YouTube and on my Animal Sanctuaries platform, Mini Motley Sanctuary, we've had a lot of people say, oh, but, people are doing it because they've got the best intentions. They want to be kind, they want to feed the pony. Do you think it is that, Natty, at the end of the day, or is it people just wanting to do what they want to do and not be told otherwise?
I think it's a bit of both, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, I think lockdown didn't help because people would go out on their daily exercise and they would, they'd make a point. I mean, their daily exercise could involve visiting the ponies locally and feeding them something nice. I mean, that they saw that as their kind of the fun thing to do for them. Almost like, we have petting zoos across the country. We have, farm parks and things. And as part of that, I mean, I know at our local farm park, we can buy a bag of food and we can go around and feed the animals. However, we are not allowed to feed the donkeys. We're not allowed to feed the ponies. We know that we can feed the deer, we can feed the sheep, we can feed the pigs, but we can't feed the ponies and the donkeys. But I think knowing that those are available, I think some people kind of think, oh, this is basically a free petting zoo, isn't it? I can just go pop
Yeah.
down the road and feed these ponies, and I'm going to save back my apple cores or, my veg peelings, and I'll save them for them. Which I mean, potentially even a one-off could be dangerous, but if there's 10 people going on the same public footpath, passing the same horse and ponies every day, and they continue to feed them, I mean, your own pony was so susceptible to, well, it sounds like an enormous bag of apples, probably bigger than him.
Yes.
But even how two makes a difference. God forbid, a huge volume of it. But so I think there's part of that. I don't necessarily think it's malicious. However, when they do have a conversation with the owner and the owner says, you can't do this, I do think people just think they know better and will do it regardless. Um, but I think what does help is having that conversation with the owner. And I've known some people that have said, I'm happy for an amount to be given, but it has to be limited. So some people have kind of almost created kind of collection boxes and said, if you've got some treats for this pony, pop them in here, thank you, and we will
Right.
distribute them kind of gradually, with his normal feed at an appropriate time. But it makes sure that they don't have a huge volume. So that's one way of doing it. But I would absolutely encourage people to kind of get in touch with the owners and have a conversation with them and get to know the ponies and what they're about. Some might love it. Some might be very happy to have, an old carrot and things. And some might not. So, but kind of having that level of engagement is really helpful. Which is why I quite like the idea of the bespoke signs as well. If you're comfortable to put your kind of contact details on there, if you want someone to find out, you want people to find out more about your ponies, then you can do that. Obviously, it's completely up to the individual. But if it's someone that are local to and you'll see them regularly, it just might be an idea. Because again, that just helps the raising awareness. And then once you kind of have that one conversation with that individual, they may go home and they might spread it across their community as well. So that's just kind of helping, the community in general, and trying to kind of reach a bit of a wider awareness.
And just circling back to you mentioning children, because of course, adults will feed horses as well. We all love horses at every age, but there's a particular draw for children, isn't there? Like you say, it's like a petting zoo activity. People think, oh, it's okay to take my children for a walk before bed and to go and feed the horses. So if the education needs to start at that child level, as you mentioned, you had a great response when you were talking to children. Do you think there should be a permanent schools program rolled out across the country to educate children in all schools? And do you think that would ever be possible with budgets and the education system as it is?
I mean that, yeah, absolutely fantastic. I'm aware of some kind of forest schools, organisations and things, and I mean I know in the local community around West Berkshire, loads of the schools they on their curriculum they go outside, they go on woodland walks, they have forest schools in place, things like that, and it's really important that there's a really good awareness and level of teaching for wildlife and communities. And also, we have a fairly local nature discovery centre, and they do a lot of teaching as well. Um, and so, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if this was brought in as part of that, it would be brilliant. I think about the kind of New Forest area, and I know they take it really seriously, and they make sure that are educated about this. But yeah, absolutely, it should be part of that. I know the legislation on DEFRA was changed. I think I want to say a couple of years ago. I don't know how widely that's been communicated, but But yeah, it's really, really important to get it out there. If that could be included, no, it doesn't take much. It's just just raising that awareness and just going through the basics. Um, and the main thing is, just permission. Just it feels like a nice thing to do, but just make permission first. Once you've kind of got that established, I think everything else kind of comes alongside that. It's really important to understand the reasons why, but the main thing is get permission first before you go and feed any animal you don't know.
Mm. And you mentioned at the beginning of the episode Lightning's story, where Lightning choked on the bag of potatoes. Absolutely tragic. I've mentioned my story. There was a recent news article across all news outlets talking about a Suffolk horse owner where the horse was fit and healthy and happy and young, 10-year-old at the start of the day. The owner checked the CCTV cam on their phone at lunchtime to see they were sort of writhing on the floor. And by the evening, they were dead, despite the owner managing to get their friends and support network to go to the horse on their lunch break from work. And there was nothing they could do because people had been feeding them cabbages, of this particular horse, cabbages, which is, of course, toxic to horses. And then the horse died in the evening, a horse that should have lived a long and happy life. And I know we don't want to dwell on too many negative and sad stories, Natalie, but could you give us some more examples of other stories? So we've had cabbages that kill horses, potatoes that kill horses. We've had my own horse being fed apples when he's susceptible to laminitis and nearly killing him. What other examples are there of what people are doing to horses across the country without realising?
Yeah, so one that's really prominent to me was a little Shetland pony called Hamish. I don't know if you came across that story, but yes, sweet little Shetland. We talked about them being quite good doers, which means they do very well on very little. Um, and somehow, and I still am at a loss in how this happened, but he was basically fed the remains of a roast dinner. And you may well, I'm sure you know, but for the wider community, horses are vegetarian. There is no way they can't digest meat. And again, I talked about earlier about the fact they can't be sick. Something goes down, it won't come out. Ponies are very greedy, so if they see something that they think looks yummy, they'll give it a go, even if it's going to damage them. They don't have that kind of level of common sense. They will gorge themselves to death effectively. So this pony did that. He stuffed his face with a leftover roast dinner, um, which I assume was some kind of takeaway, that someone was in the middle of eating and they dumped in his paddock. And he suffered with impaction colic. Luckily, the owner was able to rush him to the vet and he had emergency surgery. He had an incision, basically the full length of his belly. They got in there and managed to sort it out. And with colic, you really have to catch it quick. If the dead gut needs to be removed, obviously that can shorten the digestive system, which makes it really difficult. They managed to get in there and sort out get rid of the impaction and sew him back up. A lot of horses, even if they have had surgery, don't necessarily recover because that kind of intrusion can then impact them going forward and it can affect the digestion. So horses that kind of have colic once or twice may become prone to it and continue to suffer from it. But luckily, he survived that operation and made a full recovery. I think the owner moved him pretty swiftly after that to put him in a safer place, slightly set back from the public. And yeah, and he's doing okay. But he was really lucky, and kudos to the owner for catching it so fast. But even if it had been, in other cases, it might have been same situation may have been caught just as quick. And sometimes it's luck of the draw if they make it or not, because it's just a very risky procedure and process. So he's one that kind of springs to mind. I mean, there's a number of horses and ponies that weren't so lucky. I have a long list of owners who have come to me telling me that they had the outcome was fatal. I mean, we've got, as I mentioned, we've got Stop Feeding Our Horses pages on Facebook, Instagram, and so on. And you can go on there and have a look at some of these stories and personal stories of things that have happened. I've also got pages that just have a kind of memorials to the ponies and horses that were lost through public feeding as well. So there's a lot on there.
It's so heartbreaking, and I've seen those posts that you make, Natalie, and how gutting it is knowing that these animals would have continued their lives as much loved pets and family members as all of our animals are to us. And yet, this isn't an issue affecting dogs or cats or rabbits, because as you say, everyone knows that you wouldn't feed a dog treats on its walk. No one stops a dog and says, "Can I give it my ice cream? Can I give it some treats? Can I give it the leftovers of my lunch?" Because that's not what you do, and everyone knows that's the social way to act. And yet these horses would have continued their lives if it wasn't for humans getting in the way, doing what they want, feeding, thinking they're being generous and kind. And how heartbreaking that is. And I don't know how those owners ever recover, knowing that it wasn't down to them. You know, we all have to accept as pet owners and animal owners that one day we will lose our animal. And we hope they're going to be elderly and old and have lived a long, happy life with us. And it's hard enough then, isn't it, to say goodbye and to let go and to come to terms with that grief. How on earth do those owners recover that have lost their horses? I mean, you must have seen the after effects and heard the after effects all too many times.
Absolutely. Well, I get the honest truth is I don't think anybody ever does. I mean, when you lose anybody in your life, you grieve for a long time. And particularly when it's something completely avoidable. And we talked about Lightning earlier, and I keep thinking back to him. I mean, he was the most beautiful grey show
Mm.
pony, absolutely stunning. Um, if you ever come across the BBC Manchester radio interview that his owner has done, it is really emotional. And if I listen back to it, even now, it gets me going because you can just feel the pain. Um, it's just impossible because it's a completely unavoidable a completely avoidable thing that's happened, completely out of the owner's control. Nothing that they could have done to stop it from happening. Somebody just decided it, upon themselves to feed them, and that was the result. Um, there's also, sweet little ponies that are children's ponies that are their everything. You must know of these kind of the golden ponies that are just the most amazing schoolmasters that these kids grew up with, and then again suddenly going from living a perfectly happy, healthy life, being completely doted over and adored, to suddenly gone is just heartbreaking. And these poor kids, they shouldn't have to deal with that in their early lives. It's not fair. So yeah, it's really difficult. And again, I mean, I know a number of adult owners, and this similar things happened. Um, and for us, I mean, our our horses are our family. I mean, even now, I've been away from having my own for a long time, and it's really hard. And it's almost like a drug. I walk past the yard. I mean, my 4-year-old goes riding now, and I'll go to the yard and I'll just breathe it in, breathe in that smell. And I love it. I know
Yeah.
I miss it when I'm not around. I volunteer with British Eventing, so at least I kind of keep my foot in the door and help out and do a bit of fence judging and things when I can't ride, but and may ride friends' horses now and again. But it's a lifestyle, and we adore it. And these animals are our family. We put in most of our income and a lot of our
Yes.
time and commitment. And for things like this to happen, it's completely devastating. Um, yeah, I have no words. It's just,
Mm.
it's very, um, it's, when you lose an animal, it's a huge level of grief. I don't think people ever get over it. I often find as well when more recent stories get shared on social media, I see the same owners popping up, and, just, it's like they had that emotion all over again. It's like it's happened to them all over again because it's so real. And it's just a reminder of what happened to them personally. So yeah, so it must be really, really tough.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And you have put so much time, love, energy, effort into your social media campaigns and your signs and raising awareness. And you have won an award. Can you tell us how that came about, Natalie? Because it's so deserved, and huge congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's completely blindsided. I got contacted by the BHS, And they were, so a couple of people, the kind of equine welfare campaign officers that work within the BHS have been in touch with me over the years. And we've been kind of sharing information back and forth and trying to kind of work out tactics ourselves and things. And we even kind of fed into the video that they created a while ago to raise awareness and on what might be the best way to kind of go about that. So we've had, we've had a really good relationship. And then they contacted me and Hannah Johnstone, who was there at the beginning setting up um, the campaign to begin with. Um, and we received an Equine Welfare Award from Martin Clunes via the BHS, and that was lovely. Popped down to Newbury Racecourse to receive it. It was fantastic. I was absolutely blown away. What was really lovely as well, was seeing everybody else that had won an Equine Welfare Award for their different voluntary work for various things. So, yeah, it was fabulous. It was really lovely. Yeah.
And what does it mean? Because obviously it's a thrill, isn't it, to win an award, whatever you are doing. But for this particular campaign, what did it mean to you to get that recognition and that acknowledgement at that time?
I was really grateful. It was really lovely. I felt um, that I shouldn't be the one, just sole person to get it. I made it really clear, kind of on social media, that it was for everybody. It's a massive campaign, and everybody's participating in it. Um, so I wanted to make it really clear how many people have been involved in this process, and kind of fed into the campaign in various ways. So for me, it's a group effort. Everybody helped us kind of get there. But yeah, so grateful for recognition.
And what was it like meeting Martin Clunes? We're all going to ask.
It's starstruck. It's starstruck. I mean, he's lovely, so sweet, so friendly. Yeah, my mum joined me, and she was very chuffed to meet him as well. I think he's a bit of an idol for her. But yeah, no, it was really nice. Yeah, it's very. He's top bloke. He's really lovely.
And just thinking as well about the word community at a time when, things are very insular. We are all behind screens. Lots of us are working from home. We've got these phones that are now computers and cameras and everything all in one that we can't seem to live without. What does the community mean to you that you have built, from the ground up, from lockdown, that are there online waiting to share posts and share your videos and to spread the word and to rally behind and support each other? How does that feel to have built something online when actually social media gets a negative reputation for a lot these days? But this is doing something and making something great.
Yeah, it's great. I'm really proud of kind of what we achieved and raising that awareness. I mean, our kind of following grew over the years. So it's really nice to be involved in that. And as I say, I'm just really proud of everyone's kind of individual contributions in that we had so many people kind of come forward and volunteer for various things. I mean, there was a chap that created some kind of graphic designs for us, just in his free
Oh,
time, just because
wow.
he could, which was so sweet. A guy called Kevin Wilshire. And everybody's kind of contribution just played a part in this. And it was fab. Yeah, I'm just really grateful of the kind of community and everybody doing what they could do.
Thank you so much for listening to and watching Curious Equestrian. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube so that you don't miss an episode and all that's coming your way. Or you can subscribe to us on whatever podcast platform you listen. If you could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, that would really help us to find lots more lovely listeners. And you can also follow us on Instagram at Curious Equestrian Podcast. We'll see you next time.